Welcome back to Awakened Stories. I'm Marcus. Today we're diving into another explainer from Osho's 1001 Tales. Last episode, you might remember, we talked about a fish that literally swam right back into its bowl. It was all about refusing freedom. Well, today's story, The Emperor and the Beggar, is kind of the flip side of that. It's about how the ego refuses true freedom, but by dressing up as the exact opposite. You know, we usually picture the ego as this loud, boastful thing, but what happens when the ego figures out the absolute best way to stay in control is to pretend it doesn't even exist?
Look, I'll be totally honest with you. When I first read this tale, I genuinely laughed out loud. It starts off reading like a pretty classic, obvious comedy sketch. But here's the thing, that laughter, it really only lasts for about 30 seconds. Because once that punchline hits, the story takes a hard pivot. It turns into this incredibly precise and, frankly, a slightly uncomfortable mirror of our own minds. It highlights a psychological mechanism that, I promise you, you will not be able to unsee. Okay, so picture the scene. It's pitch black, those quiet, completely still hours right before dawn. The great Emperor Nadirshah is getting ready to launch this massive new conquest. And here is this guy, a man of just unimaginable power and wealth, down on his knees. His head is bowed, his priest is right there next to him, and he's praying to God for a blessing. He says, "I am nobody. I am just a servant of your servants. Bless me. I am going on your work. This is your victory. I am nothing. Remember, I am nothing." Right? It's this picture of absolute, profound surrender. But then, completely out of nowhere, that silence is broken. From the dark, right outside the palace walls, this other voice rings out. It's a beggar from the street, and he's praying too. And get this, he is saying the exact same words. "I am also nobody, a servant of your servants." Instantly, you have this wild contrast. Inside this magnificent palace, you've got the grand conqueror of the world, and outside, in the dirt, a destitute beggar. Both of them claiming to be absolutely nothing. Well, the emperor hears this beggar, and he absolutely loses it. He just snaps. He turns to his priest, totally outraged, and he's like, "Look at this beggar. He's a beggar, and he dares to say the same thing to God that I am saying? He has no right. Tell him to stop." He's literally furious that a guy on the street would claim the same lowly status as an emperor. And then, and this is the craziest part, seamlessly, flawlessly, the emperor just closes his eyes, bows his head again, and goes right back to his prayer. "I am nobody." Okay, let's just pause right here for a second. Ask yourself, was the emperor just being a massive hypocrite? Was he just lying through his teeth the whole time? I mean, it is so easy to just dismiss him as a fake, right? To say he was just putting on a good show for the priest. Because if it's just simple hypocrisy, well, we can just laugh at him, judge him, and walk away feeling pretty good about ourselves. But the reality is actually way more interesting and way more troubling. The crucial thing to understand here is that he wasn't lying. That's what makes this so sharp. He wasn't being a hypocrite. In that moment, he was entirely, genuinely humble before God. But he was equally, genuinely outraged that a beggar felt entitled to that same humility. Both of those things were true at the exact same time. The ego, you see, it doesn't just evaporate because you start praying. Sometimes the ego just learns how to kneel. It adopts the perfect posture of surrender without giving up an ounce of its dominance.
So let's look at section 1, humility as a decoration.
This brings us to a really profound observation from Osho. He says the ego can even use humility as its decoration. We are so heavily conditioned to spot the ego only when it's inflated, boasting about a promotion or a new car. But the ego is way smarter than that. When flexing your status is no longer socially acceptable, or when you step into a spiritual space, the ego simply changes its outfit. It realizes, hey, if I can't be the most powerful person in the room, I am absolutely going to be the most surrendered person in the room.
Which leads us to this fascinating concept, exclusive humility. Basically, this is a smallness that you are not allowed to share with me. The emperor felt this in his bones. He was essentially saying, yes, God, I am a nobody, but let's be clear, I am a very important VIP nobody. My nothingness is special because I am a literal emperor choosing to be nothing. Because if a guy begging for scraps on the street can claim that exact same smallness, well then the emperor's nothingness completely loses its market value. His humility wasn't an emptying out, it was just a different type of crown. Let's move to section 2, the ego's ultimate disguise. This right here is the core philosophical framework of why our minds do this. Osho frames this using the concept of dhammo sanantano, which means the eternal, inexhaustible law. It's this idea that the ego is endlessly adaptive. It is the ultimate shapeshifter. I mean, if you tell your ego that pride is a bad thing, it won't die. It'll just put on the costume of a saint. The ego seriously doesn't care if it's sitting on a velvet throne or kneeling on a cold stone floor, as long as it gets to be the main character of the story. Actually, we see this exact same mechanism in the teachings of Jesus too. Think about that beautiful, radical teaching, the first shall be last. Originally, that's meant to completely dismantle the whole hierarchy of power. But watch how the ego colonizes that idea. The ego hears the first shall be last and goes, oh, okay, the last are the best, game on. I am going to compete to be the absolute most last. I will be the most humble, the most invisible. It literally takes a teaching about ending competition and turns it into a brand new, hyper-competitive race to the absolute bottom. Let's bring this out of the abstract and into normal, everyday life for a second. Just the other day, I was talking with a junior colleague, and they brought up this specific stress they were feeling about a project. A stress that I felt like I had been carrying very silently and nobly for months. And my immediate knee-jerk internal reaction was, who gave you permission to feel that? I've been doing this way longer than you. That right there, that was my inner emperor, yelling at the beggar outside the window. Have you ever had a moment like that, where someone less qualified claimed a feeling or a grief or an insight that you privately felt was your exclusive territory?
Now for section 3, the trap of fixing it. So, once we actually recognize this emperor lurking inside us, the immediate instinct is to fix it, right? To banish it. But that is a massive trap. Here's how it plays out. Step 1, you notice your exclusive humility. You catch yourself in the act. Step 2, you decide to fix it, vowing to be genuinely, truly humble from now on. But then, step 3 happens. You sit back and watch your ego turn the very act of fixing it into its next big achievement. Wow, I am so self-aware. Look how good I am at spotting my own ego. By trying to fight the ego with effort, you've literally just invented a brand new game for it to win.
So how do we actually get out of this loop? Well, it's not through agonizing effort or trying to aggressively police your own thoughts. The answer is actually the beggar's secret. Think about it. The beggar wasn't trying to be humble. He was literally just praying. He wasn't out there comparing his prayer to the emperor's. He didn't care who was listening or where he ranked on some invisible ladder of spiritual surrender. Humility wasn't a costume he was putting on. It was just the raw reality of his connection in that exact moment.
Finally, section 4, who is your beggar?
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question, and I want to point this ancient mirror directly at you. Is there a beggar in your life? I mean, think about someone with fewer credentials, less experience, or just someone who, in your mind, hasn't earned the right to claim the same space, the same stress, or the same insight as you. Someone whose mere presence quietly makes you feel defensive and, frankly, very large. As you go about your week, reflect on that person. And when you notice what they trigger in you, well, stay humble.